we'll go ahead and start our subcommittee meeting today on the ad hoc TIP subcommittee. We'll just go real quick around and just introduce yourselves and who you represent. I will go first. I'm Amy Espinosa. I represent women in the at-large seat. Bill, I guess we'll go in order on the alphabetically.
Okay. I'm Bill Roberts. I'm an ex officio member of this committee, and I represent the Tampa Airport.
Hi, this is Carolyn Brown, and I represent Commissioner Gwen Myers.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christina Costa, and I represent the Tampa City Councilman Joseph Citro.
Hey, this is Terrence Trott. I represent African American at large seat. Sorry I don't have video tonight. Look forward to contributing though. Thanks.
Hello, my name is David Bailey. I was appointed by Commissioner Overman, and happy to be here. So.
All right. There's two names I don't recognize, Claire and Justin. Are they with MPO or are they new?
Actually, they're with DOT.
Okay.
Justin, do you want to introduce yourself? I see you're unmuted.
Yes, so Justin Hall, I'm the government liaison administrator for District 7. So I'm sure you guys have seen Roger Roscoe around at meetings. So he works with me. And then Claire is a consultant with FDOT, and I believe she's going to be on and off the meeting. And we're just here in case you have any questions about any projects. So.
Awesome. Thank you. I guess the next step is just to remind everybody that per the bylaws, I guess I'll do my best to address everyone that has questions and to be recognized. Next section is public comment. Do we have anyone for public comment today?
I don't think anybody signed up, and I don't see anybody as an attendee to be unmuted. So unless I missed somebody, I don't think we have any public comment.
Sounds good. The summary of the prior meeting was included in the notes for the agenda, but I can give a quick recap. So we met on March 19th to have an open discussion addressing areas of the TIP that were unclear. And through this conversation, we identified a few areas that we felt would make the TIP information more understandable. In short, that was a list of last year's top priorities, changes, simplification, and how they relate to the current year. The length of time that the project has been included on the TIP, as well as any dependencies. Clarity on why some projects are more important than others with respect to growth in the county. For example, does the project support a specific job cluster or economic development? We also discussed clarity on how the project list is determined and prioritized based on the 6 program areas, I think they're called, that have already been defined. We talked about links to related information such as maps or projects and clear call-outs with respect to equity. So how projects are impacting or supporting disadvantaged communities, for example, and what benefit or relief might be provided to those people within the community. And that pretty much summarizes our last meeting. At the end of the meeting, we decided we would have a further discussion at our regular CAC meeting, and then meet prior, which is the meeting today, to kind of give our feedback on the information that will be presented to the entire committee on Wednesday. The purpose of this committee is to, again, identify areas of the TIP to help contribute feedback to the people who are actually creating the tip, which I know is a whole team. Johnny is just the face, I believe. And then to make it more easily understandable to the CAC prior to voting. So that's kind of a summary and a purpose. And now I will hand it over to Johnny. I believe Johnny has a presentation for us. Go ahead, Rich.
One note, included in the agenda material was a recap or summary of the previous meeting. I guess you could call them sort of abbreviated minutes. I don't really think we need to approve them by formal vote, and we're not meeting in person anyway, so we can't do that. But I guess if anybody has looked through them and has any comments or corrections, now would be the time to mention it. I didn't see anything. They look pretty good to me.
Same here.
But okay, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, no problem. I'm very new to this, so I appreciate any guidance. And then Johnny, I think the next bullet is all you. And then once you give your presentation, we'll open it up for feedback and discussion.
All right, yeah, thanks, Amy. Rich, do you want to run my slides?
I'm gonna try.
So while Rich gets this loaded up, I gave a presentation, a similar one to the TAC this morning. The difference between the TAC Technical Advisory Committee presentation and the one that your committee is going to see on Wednesday is that we tried to highlight the points that you all raised during our first meeting and call them out specifically. So the TAC in general is more familiar with this document, not only because staff has seen it multiple times, but they also participate in creating it. So in your version, I spent a little bit more time going over the background and trying to specifically answer the questions that you all had last month when we met. So just to recap what I heard, and Amy, I thank you for going over the list of items you wanted us to address. But the first thing that stood out to me during our previous meeting was that I think one of you said it's the most intimidating part of being on the CAC is feeling like you have to take on the burden or the responsibility of approving projects in the TIP. So we definitely heard that comment, and we're trying to simplify this as much as possible. I agreed with you strongly that the TIP doesn't need to be a 200+ page document. No one's going to read that. So our goal for this project was to get it down to single digits, if not a document of 10 pages or less, at least close to that. And we think that we've almost accomplished our goal. We're going to have some additions to it over the next month as we continue to get more feedback. But in addition to it being intimidating, yeah, we heard you that it's difficult to understand the projects. You wanted us to discuss what the relationship is or the connection between the long-range plan, the TIP, and then some of our other planning activities. We heard you say that you wanted to understand why some projects are needed, and then talk about what the future of the county is and where growth is occurring and why that might require different kinds of transportation projects as opposed to some of the more established, mature urban neighborhoods. So that's just a recap of what I heard. And Rich, if you want to click to the next slide, let's get into it.
Okay. I assume that means you can see your first slide.
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
So I broke the presentation down into 3 separate sections. The first section is the longest because this is where I'm spending most of my effort decoding the TIP and explaining the processes. Next slide, please. I think even for folks who have been on the CAC for many years and who have participated in the process before, this will be a section that they're probably going to want to spend a little bit of time reading through and understanding because, again, our goal for this year was to do a major update. Last year's TIP was just way too long. And so even if you're used to the process, the layout and the arrangement of all the information is going to be different. So we want folks to again, like take some time. And part of this update process for me and my team is to give the CAC at least 2 opportunities to review it, and hopefully early June, when you see the tip for the second time, you'll have a long list of really informed questions. And if there's anything that you don't understand, that would be a good opportunity for you to ask and get clarification. To begin, the relationship between the 25-year long-range transportation plan and the 5-year transportation improvement program. As you know, we abbreviate the transportation improvement program as the TIP. The TIP is a plan that has 5 years worth of transportation projects in it. The 5 years of projects in the TIP are the first 5 years of our long-range plan, which is at least a 20-year vision, if not 25 years or more. So we can't fit a ton of detail into the 25-year plan. That's just way too many projects to list and way too many specifics to include. So whereas the LRTP is purposefully left broad and is more of a visionary document, the 5-year TIP is intended to be very specific. The projects listed in the TIP are described in a lot more detail. The funding amounts are very specific, in some cases down to the dollar. The phases of projects are included, the funding sources are included, the locations, all that information is stuff you will only find in the TIP. None of it is included in the LRTP. Next slide, please. The TIP is one of the MPO's main responsibilities, and at least in the state of Florida, it has to contain 5 years worth of projects. That's not true for every state, and it has to be updated every year. That's also not true for every state. So being in the state of Florida, the MPOs have to take on this long process and do it every year, and we include way more projects than some states. Other than that, there are a lot of federal and state requirements. The main ones are shown on this slide, and the ones that I want to highlight are that the TIP has to be consistent with the long-range plan. So specifically for major projects that are widening roads, or projects that are high dollar amount, or mass transit, those projects that appear in the TIP also have to appear in the long-range transportation plan. There's other connections between the LRTP and the TIP as well, like the funding buckets are a consistent theme across both plans. And if you're not familiar with those, I'll explain them again in a little bit more detail later. The TIP also has to be coordinated with FDOT and HART. It has to include regionally significant projects, projects that are funded by the Federal Highway Administration or the Federal Transit Administration. It has to be cost feasible, meaning that these projects in the TIP are not just a wish list. It's not a dream plan. It's realistic, right? The amount of money that we're anticipating receiving in revenues should match the anticipated cost for all the projects. And the TIP also has to be submitted to the public to get feedback. In the TIP, we include a list of priority projects, and the prioritization methodology has to be documented and it has to be data-driven. Very similar to the process that, if you recall, we undertake for the State of the System report. So that's another connection to an existing document. We use a lot of data to analyze the impacts of these projects, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. Next slide, please. If I wanted to just quickly describe the TIP, I would say it's a plan with lots of lists of projects, at least 3. So for consistency purposes, we chose to title all 3 of these lists using Table 1, Table 2, and Table 3, which is something we've done for a while. So Table 1 is a list of existing priorities that are funded or partially funded for construction. And the reason why priorities may remain on this list until they're totally constructed and done is because even if they've received a partial amount of money, we want to leave them on there to show that there's still community support for this. It's still a priority. We believe it's still an urgent need by the community, and we're going to leave it on there until it's done. Table 2 is what you might call the priority list. It's referred to in many different ways, but in essence, Table 2 is a list of candidate projects that are seeking funding. So to get on Table 2, a project has to demonstrate that it's addressing an urgent need of the community, and it has to be seeking funding. The third table is really long, and that's all other projects funded in the next 5 years. So together, these three tables form the bulk of the TIP. Next slide, please. So just to reiterate, Table 1 is a list of projects that have already been elevated to the status of priorities. These have already been adopted by or approved by the committees and the board. We consider them to be priorities, meaning that the data show that each of these projects, once completed, will address an urgent need in the community, be that congestion relief or safety or infrastructure or something else. The project has received at least some money for construction, and projects projects on this list need to remain here until construction is complete. Next slide, please. Table 2 are the projects that are candidates for funding. The way that this list is built is when at the beginning of the TIP period, early in the year, we meet with the jurisdictions and we have a sit down with them, and they submit a list of projects they consider to be priorities. When they submit that list to us, we look at each project and we pull some data, and we make a determination as to whether or not they actually will address an urgent need. If there's a project on the jurisdiction's list that is not addressing a community need, we'll kick it off. If we agree with them and we determine that it's going to have a major impact on congestion or safety, then it can move to the priority list. Once it's established as a priority, we pull some data, we do an analysis on it, and based on how it performs in our analysis, we rank them in order from projects that have, or projects at the top of the list have the potential to have the most impact, and toward the bottom, they'll have the least impact. Next slide, please. And Table 3 is the longest list. It's the catch-all. It's the longest because it includes all projects in the FDOT work program. It includes requests that we get for planning studies. It can include projects that don't neatly fit into one of our programs. And it can also include projects that are listed in each jurisdiction's capital improvements program. If the project ends up in Table 3 because we found it in one of the jurisdiction's capital improvements programs, what that should signal is that we don't actually control what's happening with local dollars, so it's only there for convenience, right? We include it in Table 3 just so that if folks are interested in what's going on in their jurisdiction, they have an easy place to look it up. Next slide, please. Going to spend a lot of time on this because Table 2 is really like the meat and potatoes of the TIP in many ways. So going back to Table 2, this is the way that the priorities become ranked. This is more or less like the production process. Again, we meet with the jurisdictions. They submit a list of projects that they want to be added to the priority list. When we receive that, we look at all the projects together. And for this past year, I want to say we received maybe 20 submissions. We looked at each of those 20 projects and organized them into one of our investment programs. On the right of the screen is just a symbol of the investment program. The top one is infrastructure projects. The yellow is Vision Zero. Those are safety projects. The purple is smart cities, meaning congestion relief. The blue is real choices when not driving. These projects are typically multimodal, so like bike ped, transit, those kind of things. And the green is major projects, highway widenings, high dollar value projects, mass transit projects. Once we organize the projects into one of those program areas, we find the data that we need to evaluate it, and then we run the calculations. Based on how the project performs, meaning like based on the results, we rank the priorities in order from most impactful to least. Next slide, please. So once we do that, table 2 is basically done, right? Like once we've ranked the projects and organized them, that's pretty much how table 2 is produced. There's a couple other significant elements in table 2 that you might be unaware of or not sure what they mean. One of the columns indicates the suggested funding source. I know you can't see it too well on here, but that column is where we think, and the MPO makes this suggestion of where we think would be the best opportunity for that project to get funded. So those abbreviations you see on there are codes for a grant source. Based on the type of project, based on the jurisdiction submitting the request, based on the facility type, we make suggestions to the jurisdictions about which funding sources they should go after to get money for that project. The tip, I think on the first or second page, will have a link to a glossary where all those funding codes are explained, but some of the most common ones that you'll see on table 2 are SU. SU is flexible funds. It's a little bit of a misabbreviation or a misnomer, but those are Surface Transportation Program funds. They can be spent on a variety of projects. So they're maybe the most flexible dollars we have. They can include mass transit, bike ped. They can apply to roads, highways. A lot of different things could be funded with SU. Some of the more special purpose sources or things that are not quite as flexible are TA. TA stands for Transportation Alternatives. Dollars from TA are intended to fund smaller multimodal projects. Only things like bike ped facilities, recreational trails, and a couple others. HSIP, most of the time you will see that abbreviation in the Vision Zero program category. HSIP stands for Highway Safety Improvement Program. So the funds in HSIP are intended for projects that are going to produce a significant reduction in fatal and injury crashes. Another one that's actually not shown on this little screenshot that I took is SIGP. SIGP, CIGP. It stands for County Incentive Grant Program. So that's one of the more restrictive. This one has a lot of caveats to how it can be used. It's a grant program provided to counties for the purpose of alleviating traffic congestion on the state highway system. So right there's 3 criteria that need to be fulfilled to qualify for SIGP funds. It's one that's not very flexible, and so it's pretty easy to identify if a project would be eligible for that type of funding source. Next slide, please. So aside from the funds column or the suggested fund type column, another good resource for you all to know about is the TIP tool. I took screenshots of it. This TIP tool provides, or it's a mapping application that we developed that shows the location of projects in the TIP and where they're located around the county. It's already available on the website. And once again, I included the link. There's some base maps that are available, so you can overlay projects to see where they're located within the county. You can kind of get a sense of the pop density based on the location. If you zoom in, you can kind of see where notable landmarks are and where growth is. This doesn't exactly hit the request that you all gave us at the last working group meeting. I know that you wanted to see the projects overlaid with demographic data, like in the communities of concern map, and you also wanted to see where projected growth is. I don't have that ready for you right now, but we do have a work order with staff in our agency to overlay the projects with the COC map and with pop density. So those are forthcoming. I'm hoping that we'll have those ready in time for the livable roadways mail out. So I'm hoping that within about a week, maybe 10 days, we can have that data ready for you all. Next slide, please. Because the COC map is not built into the TIP tool yet, another location you can go to give you that data, granted not with the TIP projects, that are currently adopted, would be the Health Atlas. This is also available on our website, and I included the link for it up top. The Health Atlas has information in it about the communities of concern. So if you go onto this and play around with some of the layers, you'll be able to see data like where some of the communities with a higher proportion of racial minorities are located, where there are hotspots for low-income communities, where there are zero vehicle households and folks with disabilities and things like that. So that information is available on our website. Unfortunately, it's just not convenient yet. We don't have them in the same place, but I'm working on making that. Next slide, please. Okay, so section 2 includes highlights from the updated tables. So this is the section where we're calling out what has changed this year as opposed to last year's TIP. Next slide, please. All right, so table 1 is more or less the same as last year's. Not too many projects have advanced to complete construction. Again, remembering that projects should remain on this list until construction is totally done. What that means in practice is that in any given year, only a couple projects, at most a handful, are going to come off. So there happens to be a lot of consistency between last year's table 1 and this year's table 1. The only differences, or the major differences you might pick up on, are the color coding of the investment program. So last year, all of these projects were just sorted randomly. This year, we want to organize them according to which of our investment programs they're making an impact on. So at the very top, we included projects that fall into stated good repair and resilience. Underneath that, color coded for Vision 0. That should make it easier for you all to identify what the project is actually doing for the community, right? As far as we know, only one project has been completed, although we're still working with agency staff to get us an updated list. If anything has been completed, if any construction has been completed, they're going to get back to us and we can remove it from the list and delete it forever. But there are at least 4 additions. The first is bus replacements. That's a HART project. Second is bus stop capital repairs, another HART project, and support for the T-bar to van pool. All 3 of those are transit projects, or sorry, not transit projects. Those are infrastructure projects for transit agencies. And then the last one on this list is Rio Street from Gray to Cypress and the Howard Franklin Bridge trail connections. Those are the multimodal connections to the bridge. So as you get off of the bridge into Tampa, where those trail connections are located. That's just a sample of what you'll see in Table 1. As you all know, Table 1 is significantly longer than this, so the full list is available at the bottom. Next slide, please, or with the link that's located at the bottom. All right, Table 2, again, this table is the one that does change considerably from year to year, because as we get new priorities submitted to us, we have to calculate all the data and we have to reprioritize them again against each other every single year. So there's quite a bit of change in Table 2. To begin with, I want to share what our existing targets are and how we're performing relative to state of good repair, so that you can get a sense of like how we're doing and where some of that money could be going toward to improve. So we just set these targets back in 2018 and we reviewed them last year. They're going to remain in place until 2022. And this is also another example of how our state of the system report connects to the TIP. Some of the targets we set are for condition of interstate pavement. We have a target to have more than 60% of interstate pavement in good condition. We're almost meeting that. We have a target to have less than 5% of interstate pavement in poor condition, and we're beating that. Non-interstate pavement, we have a target for more than 40% of it to be in good condition, and we're almost meeting that. And we have a target for less than 5% of non-interstate pavement to be in poor condition, and we're beating that. As far as bridges, we're significantly beating the target of 50% in good condition. Our actual numbers are about 76%, and we want to have less than 10% of our bridges, or fewer than 10% of our bridges, in poor condition. We actually have none of them in poor condition, so that's pretty good. Next slide, please. We also have targets for the condition of transit assets. So we set targets for ourselves to improve the condition of buses and equipment and facilities and infrastructure. And we're actually doing okay regarding our transit assets. We only set those back in 2018, and we had some incomplete data. We're going to be spending some time updating those again next year. But as you can see, only about half of our bus assets are in what we would consider a state of good repair. Next slide, please. So for prioritizing projects that fit into the state of good repair investment program, we don't actually spend a lot of time accessing data and calculating the anticipated benefit. One of the reasons why we don't spend a lot of time for projects in this program is because there is a huge backlog of projects. There's about $1.5 billion of deficit in this program category that we're expecting by the year 2045. That is an enormous amount of money. So rather than spending a lot of time separating projects out, we just end up allocating about $4 million in SU funds to HART every year, and they use them for either bus replacements or bus stop repairs. So that's how we use the money in state of good repair just about every year. Next slide, please. The next program category is Vision Zero. This is our safety category, and we set targets for this program every year in January or February. Our goal for this year is to have fatalities not exceed 190, and our goal for serious injuries is to not exceed 1,201. There are a ton of other safety targets that we adopt every year, but those don't pertain to the TIP. When we're looking at TIP projects, we're only concerned with fatalities and serious injuries. Next slide, please. We do spend quite a bit more time evaluating projects that are going to go on the TIP priority list. So before we add anything to the table 2 in the TIP, we calculate the data. We actually pull 5 years worth of fatal and serious injury crash data. So for every project that makes it onto this list, we have pulled that data, we have divided the crashes by centerline mile, and we use that to compare apples to apples for all the safety projects. And as a result, it's very time consuming, but it gives us a really good idea of how these projects will perform if they were to receive money and get constructed. So we have about 10, it looks like maybe a little bit more than 10 safety projects that we added to the tip this year. The first is a project on Dale Mabry from Mango Ave to West Pearl Ave. There's a complete street project planned for West Shore Boulevard from Kennedy up to Boy Scout, which is where International Mall is. Phases 2A and 3C of the Green Spine Cycle Track. There are 2 sidewalks planned for middle schools at Tomlin and Marshall. Tomlin and Marshall are middle schools located in Plant City, I believe. There's a project on Lois Ave from Kennedy Boulevard to Boy Scout. There's a project on Bullard Parkway, which is Bush Boulevard turns into Bullard once it crosses 56th Street. So this is a project in Temple Terrace from Glen Arvin to 78th Street. There's another one at Davis Road from Morris Bridge to Temple Terrace Highway, which is another name for Bullard Parkway. There's one on West Shore Boulevard from Fair Oaks Ave to Neptune Way in Tampa, and another one on Ashley Drive from Tyler Street to Laurel Street in Tampa. Next slide, please. The third investment program is called Smart Cities. This deals with reducing congestion. We have targets that we established back in 2018. Again, we're going to update them next year. But the 3 performance metrics we look at are interstate reliability. And we have a goal to have more than 75% of our network performing reliably. And we're meeting that target, or we're hitting that target on the nose. When I say reliably, or when I say we want the interstates to be performing reliably, that doesn't mean that we have a goal for them to be less congested. We already know that our interstates are congested, and it doesn't look like we're going to have them uncongested anytime soon. So rather than focusing on that, we at least want them to be reliably congested. So when you're heading to work in the morning, we want you to know that your 20-minute commute is going to be about 20 minutes on any given day, and you're not expecting a 20-minute drive and actually getting a 60-minute drive. I hope that makes sense. We also have targets for reliability for freight vehicles. So we keep track of how long commutes take for commercial vehicles. And we also have a target to have the non-interstate highway system performing reliably about 50% of the time. And we're actually far exceeding that target. Next slide, please. So we have those 3 targets that we establish in general. So what that means is we want to have good reliability on the interstate and non-interstate. When we're looking at projects in the TIP, it can get far more complicated than that, because we're not only looking at projects on the interstate and non-interstate NHS, we're not only looking at on roads that are traveled by freight vehicles. So we have to get a little bit more creative and detailed, and it can get kind of complicated. When a project is submitted to us and we feel that it belongs in the smart cities category, we may look at travel time during the peak periods. Peak periods meaning 6 to 9 a.m., 4 to 7 p.m. So that's the first thing we look at. We may also look at travel delay in minutes. If it's an intersection project, we may look at the minutes of delay a quarter mile away or on the approach for the intersection. If it's a project at a specific location, like at a parking garage or around a school, we may look at the delay for all the roads that are within 1 square mile of that location. And if it's a transit project, we may look at on-time performance to rank it. So as you can see, based on the type of project that is slated to improve reliability or reduce congestion, a whole host of factors could come up. Data may not be available. All of these metrics that you see on the screen, they may not apply to that project. So we have to get a little bit creative. That's all background information for you. But the difference between last year's TIP and this year's TIP is that 4 projects were submitted to us. We agreed that they should be prioritized in the Smart Cities program, and they are Alexander Street at Jim Johnson Road, Alexander Street at James Redmond Parkway, South Park Road at Coronet Road. I believe all 3 of those projects are in Plant City. Yeah, I believe all 3 of them are intersection projects. And then lastly, there's a transit project. So this would be a project for HART to replace their CAD AVL system. CAD AVL can improve on-time performance of buses, meaning that they'll get to the destination or they'll get to the bus stop at the time that they're supposed to be there, because the CAD AVL helps better track the location of the buses and predict how long it'll take for the bus to get to the stop. Next slide, please. The 4th investment program or program category is real choices when not driving. We don't have federal measures that apply to real choices, so we had to create our own. And the way that we assess the impact or benefit of any of these multimodal projects is actually pretty simple. We look at the location of the trail or side path or bike or a pedestrian project like sidewalk or new transit service, and we identify what the pop density is in the location of the proposed project. And in reality, what this means is that if there is a project submitted to us, like the Green Spine cycle track, or filling a sidewalk gap, or a new trail or a recreational trail, we look at the location of it, and if it's in an area with a lot of people, high population density, that can go toward the top of the priority list. So for this year, we actually had quite a few projects submitted to us, and most of them fall under or are described as a multimodal improvement. Some of them have safety benefits as well. From Tampa, we received 5. One is West Riverwalk from Platt Street to Bro Rain. Another is West Riverwalk from Kennedy to Palmetto Street or Rome Ave. Another is Rome Ave from Platt to Columbus. Columbus Drive from Rome to North Boulevard. Ridgewood Park from North Boulevard to Columbus Drive. 14th Street from Columbus Drive to 13th Ave. Adamo Drive, Greenway Gap. This one goes from 22nd Street to 34th Street. A footbridge at Whiteway Drive. It's like a footbridge, or it's actually a bridge that's big enough for small vehicles like golf carts. That one's in Temple Terrace. Baum Road from US 301 to Clement Pride Road, and another piece of the South Tampa Greenway, this one being at Picnic Island, which is a park. Next slide, please. And then the last investment program is major investments for economic growth. It's the next one. One back. Yeah, there you go. This one has specific rules pertaining to it, because any project that ends up in the major investments program is high dollar, or a highway widening project, or adding capacity through a major transit investment. And so any project that ends up in the major investments program has to also be referenced in the LRTP, the long range plan. For these projects, we look first at whether or not they're going to be located in an area that has a density of employment. So we look on our maps and see if they're near a major job cluster, minor job cluster, or no job cluster. We also look at the volume capacity ratio on the corridor that the improvement is slated for. And then lastly, we would look at the anticipated reduction in vehicle hours of delay per center line mile, meaning like if we were to fund this major capacity project, would it actually improve congestion? And 4 projects that we received this year made the cut, and we believe they belong on the priority list. The first is the North-South Metro Rapid Construction, also known as Tampa Arterial BRT. That's a HART project. The second is Brush Street from Whiting to Kennedy Boulevard. That's a City of Tampa project. Next is Gibsonton Drive from I-75 to US 301. And lastly, Big Bend Road. This was submitted to us as a trip priority, meaning that this project may have regional significance beyond just Hillsborough. And Big Bend Road was formerly a trip priority. It was already funded, and the project that we received this year is being requested as a priority to add 2 additional lanes on the bookends. So US 41 to Covington Garden Drive is on the west side, and then 75 comes right down Big Bend, and on the east side, Simmons Loop Road to US 301. Next slide, please. So that about wraps up all of the projects that we received that were submitted as potential priorities. All of those were evaluated, and the staff recommendation is going to be to add all the projects I listed as new projects on table 2, the priorities. Once that is wrapped up, the next steps are, next slide, please. So we have a list of projects that we are seeking consensus from the other MPOs in the Tampa Bay area. And we have a working group. We have actually not one working group. We have 2 working groups comprised of staff from each of the MPOs within West Central Florida. The counties that are included in this working group are Citrus, Hernando, Pasco, Polk, Pinellas, Hillsborough, and Sarasota and Manatee. For all the MPOs within all of those counties, they send staff to meet and talk about what projects may have regional significance. Because if there are any projects that have regional significance, they need to be included in the TIP. I am handling the TRIP priorities for this year, and the one submission from Hillsborough County is the project I just described to you, Big Bend Road. The only other project that has regional significance that is located in Hillsborough County is already on the TRIP priority list, and it probably will stay there. That's the West Shore Interchange. Some of the other counties in the area are submitting new projects to be considered as, quote, regionally significant. There are also a lot of trail projects, off-road trails, recreational trails, and side paths. Wade Reynolds, who I'm sure you all know, manages that group. So I believe that they are meeting soon to finalize the list of priorities. Once the TRIP and multi-use trail and major projects are all agreed upon at the staff level, we will submit those for approval by the CCC board. The chair's coordinating committee is a board of elected officials from all of those counties that I just mentioned. They meet periodically and they will be in charge of approving any of these projects as regionally significant. And of course, if they are determined to be regionally significant, they will appear in our tip. Next slide, please. This slide, I didn't get a chance to update. It says TAC because I gave members of the TAC some work to do this morning. But just for your own information, Table 1 and Table 2, we're relying on TAC members and staff from our agency partners to provide some info. If there was any info on Table 1 or 2 that we're missing, it was highlighted in red. So the draft that's available online and at the very back end of the tip draft, if you look through the tables, you'll see that there might be some red text stating things like information needed on phasing, or estimates need to be updated, or application needs to be submitted. That's stuff that needs to be handled at the staff level. Those projects, even though they have missing info, they can remain on the priority list, but for them to have a better shot at getting funding and kind of graduating from Table 2 to Table 1, that information needs to be provided at some point. As you all know, we met with you sometime last month, toward the end of April. So we took your feedback, we tried to incorporate it in the tip. We're going to continue doing that based on the conversations that we have with the rest of the committee on Wednesday. We're going to note all of the feedback we get and then again go back to the drawing board. So this tip will probably be redrafted at least 2 more times before it's nearly finalized. And then once we meet with the TAC and CAC again at the beginning of June, that'll be like the last elements or the last feedback we collect before we finalize the tip and present it to the MPO board on June 9th. Next slide, please. I think that's pretty much it. And then of course, I'll solicit feedback. And I'll take your feedback now if you think any changes should be made before Wednesday.
Anyone want to be recognized? If not, I do. Can you hear me, Johnny?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
And I got your email this afternoon with the marked up version. I didn't get a chance to look at it yet.
That's okay. With respect to the tables, in the documentation that is out online that was sent in our agenda for Wednesday, there is 4, I think, links. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so 1 is the draft tip document, and then the next 3 are, I believe, Table 1, 2, and 3. Is that correct? On the website?
Yes.
Okay, so I didn't make that connection until just now. So I don't know if there's a way to label those more clearly as Table 1, 2, and 3 on the links. And and also in the tip document. I know I sent you a comment on that, but that just didn't make a connection to me, which I think is important to understand.
Yeah, you're right. At the time that we sent out the tip draft for you all to review, we still hadn't determined amongst ourselves whether we should continue calling them tables 1, 2, and 3, or change it up, or just really how to name them. But yeah, we can retitle the drafts on the website so folks know what table they're looking at. And in the document, since we have tentatively decided to call them tables 1, 2, and 3, we can fill in page numbers and reference them in at least a couple different ways so people know what they're looking at and what it means.
Yeah, that would be great. The only other thing I wasn't sure that I didn't have a lot of information on was the community needs. Do those align with the performance areas, or I guess you call them a couple different things. And I know you said that the other time. One is an investment program performance area. The 5.
Yeah.
Is that what the community need is? Because that wasn't clear to me either.
Yeah, that's kind of how we determine community. I mean, for a project to be converted into a priority, the jurisdictions have to submit it. They kind of have to make the case that the project is addressing a community need. So they have to provide us with at least enough info for us to verify that a project they're calling a safety project will have an impact on safety. And if they submit enough documentation for us to kind of buy in, then we look at the project boundaries, we dig into the crash data, do the calculations, and if it comes back in agreement, meaning that it's going to affect one of our performance measures, then we work it into the Vision Zero program area or investment program. And yeah, the other thing you said about the terminology, I guess is all over the board. I typically call them investment programs. Some other staff might call them investment buckets or LRTP buckets, because I guess this is probably before I started working here. There was some move to call them investment buckets, and I'm not sure when that started. Rich is probably the authority on that. But since I've been working here, I've always just called them investment programs.
Yeah, I think, shared language is helpful, especially to new people, because they might not connect the two. So at least publicly, maybe consider one term. That's just some feedback. And I think that's all I had. I am really impressed with the organization of the tip document. I think it's miles ahead of where it was last year as far as clarity. So really appreciate y'all's effort on that.
That's great to hear. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that you'll think of a bunch of different things, if not now, then during the meeting or whenever. If you ever have any comments, feel free to jot them down and shoot me an email.
Okay. Christine, you're recognized.
Oh, thank you. Hey, Amy. Johnny, this is so much better for us to digest and process, as we attempt to do good work for our community. So thank you. Thank you for that. I have a couple of clarifying points and questions and some ideas, but about four different things. I just want to make sure I understand, when you say jurisdictions, does that mean the 2 cities in our county and then of course unincorporated? So are there 3 jurisdictions that that the MPO meets with to ascertain their needs and kind of start vetting ideas and projects?
Not necessarily. We use the term jurisdictions, even though maybe that's not the most appropriate way to cover it. It's really our partners. So we could receive a priority request letter from the county, the 3 cities, Hart could be included, the airport, Port Tampa Bay, T-BARDA, any of those agencies. See, again, like I'm lacking the appropriate term. Any of those jurisdictions could submit a project that eventually makes its way onto the priority list.
Okay, thank you. That helps me. Jurisdictions to me kind of has a geographical flavor to it, but actually these would be agencies or stakeholders or something like that. Okay, thanks. Then I think you showed us I just want to make sure I understand that you did say that you are working on and we're going to get to a point where those map overlays are going to be exist, right?
Yes, we submitted a work order.
Yeah, okay.
I submitted a work order for our tech team to put those maps on there. I know that they will be able to. It's just a matter of how far down the list we are. I know that they're really backed up, but I'm begging and pleading to get that expedited.
Busy people. Okay. Then the color coding, you had, I think, on one of the tables, color coding to determine a couple of things. I just want to make sure that if possible, that the color coding is consistent, because you have color coding in the icons that identify like what category, and then maybe a different set of color coding. And I'm not sure if there's potential to have, for instance, a Vision Zero project identified throughout, at any time it's referenced, whether it's a progress related element or not, that it would be, just easy to quickly include that's in that category, whichever. And then I just wanted to say just a slide order suggestion, like table 2 as an example, to maybe, rather than big bullets and little bullets, maybe add some numbers, go in numeric, just as an easier way for people to, you said something when you were presenting, like, okay, the 5 things have been added, or five something. And so it just would make the slide a little bit more orderly and easy to interpret if, when you can, there's just numbers versus, dots.
Sure.
Bullets. And that is everything I had. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Christine. David, you're recognized. If you still have a question.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. No, actually, my question kind of overlapped with Christine's, especially with respect to jurisdiction. So we got that answered. And I just want to say thank you to Dr. Wong, because this is just a vast improvement. And it's clearer to me now. So thank you.
That's great. Thanks. It wasn't just me. It's a long list of folks who are helping. And I'll be sure to pass the kudos along to everyone. Maybe all by
Yes, thank you to you and team. You and team.
Appreciate it. Thanks, David.
Johnny, I do have one more thing. Because in your presentation, one of the other things that was not necessarily clear to me on the tables is CIP, right? The local projects that you guys have no jurisdiction, or, well, I use that word, no authority over. So there is on one of your slides, there's a brush to whiting, and you mentioned that that's a City of Tampa project. Is that a CIP project?
No, it was submitted to us as a priority request.
Okay.
So projects that are submitted to us as priorities, this is a caveat, I hope it doesn't confuse anyone. Any of these projects may have been listed in a CIP in previous years. If one of the jurisdictions decided, hey, we're tired of waiting to get a grant, let's just use our local dollars to pay for it. It's like a permeable boundary between any of these lists. Just because it's listed in a CIP doesn't mean that it couldn't be submitted as a priority request to us at a later time. And then again, if it's been on the priority list for a while and it hasn't moved, an agency or a jurisdiction may say, hey, let's just use our local dollars instead. I think Rich has a comment. I hope I didn't tell you the wrong info.
No, I was just going to add that one reason that some projects might show up on this list of candidates for funding, state and federal funding, and then maybe drop off, or vice versa, is that it takes a long time for the state and federal funding to actually get allocated, because we are normally adding new projects to the end of the 5-year program. So, we're sitting here in 2021, it might be 2026 or even 2027 before dollars are programmed, committed to that particular project. It's a common complaint or question that comes up from our jurisdictional stakeholders, to use Christine's word. Why can't they get funding quicker? And I think the last time we got together, I explained, that you certainly could get funding quicker, but that would probably mean something else would be knocked out or pushed further back in the program, which is something we try to resist, or, our friends at DOT try to resist, because they like to try to keep, their program, the FDOT work program, stable at least the first 3 years. So, a project that shows up for funding this year or next year or the year after that, they want to try to make sure that that actually happens. It's kind of a commitment on their part. But I do think that what Johnny has gone through with you is a lot to absorb. And, you can see that somebody once said, well, why do we even have a TIP? It seems like a gigantic stapling exercise, where you just collect all of these projects in a big list and you staple them together and you submit it to the feds and say, here's what we want to have funded. Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. And I think Johnny is certainly giving you an idea of that. And, we do try to maximize the impact of the funding that we do get. And just another quick note on the funding that we do get, and I think we might have mentioned this last time, like most of the funding suggestions that Johnny was highlighting are in fact just that. They're suggestions to DOT. We can't actually dictate to DOT that, you will fund from this program or from that program. With a couple of exceptions, we do have some authority to program those SU dollars that he was talking about. And also some of the TA, transportation alternative dollars. So we can direct funding to specific priorities in those cases. But in total, those are somewhere between, $15 to $20 million a year, which is a lot of money, but it's really a drop in the bucket compared to the rest of the DOT work program. So our ability to, steer the ship is a little bit limited. But I will say that what we put on the priority list, I think DOT does a great job trying to honor, and it just takes a while for things to actually move up in the program to the point where they're ready to go. Anyway, I think the other thing I would point out about some of the mapping tools that Johnny referenced, what he showed you is the current version of, or I should say the currently adopted transportation improvement program doesn't have all these new projects in there yet, because we're not going to change that mapping until the new program is actually adopted sometime, we hope, around June 9th, and then it'll be updated. But once it is adopted and we get that map in place, you can then click on any one of those little lines on the map and a little window will pop open and it'll show, what the status of that project is, what it is, some idea of the project length or details, and the funding that goes with it. So there's a lot of information sort of buried beneath the surface, but it is, I think, a useful tool. I find myself going there to remind myself, what is this line on the map? So those are my comments. I'm not sure what you're seeing right now. I think we're still on the PowerPoint presentation, but we were, I think, trying to get some good discussion going. And, this is, like I said, getting, it's a lot of information to absorb, but I think between now and perhaps Wednesday, when the whole CAC meets, if you have further questions, certainly we'll be happy to try to entertain them at that time. Or if there's something that occurs to you before then and you want to ask a question, you can certainly get it to us ahead of time and we'll try to address it.
I'll go to Bill and then Christine.
Bill,
Sorry.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. This has been very helpful, and I think we're clearly moving in the right direction. I wanted to ask Dr. Wong a question about projects that we've been reading about in the paper that the DOT has been granted additional funding. For example, US Highway 98, which is in the district, but not in Hillsborough County. When do you think those projects would show up, and will the TIP need to be amended for projects like that get added after June 9th?
You're gonna have to defer to a DOT rep on that. I actually haven't heard too much about those projects, and if they're not in Hillsborough County, the chances I know much about them at all are slim to none.
Justin?
Yeah, Bill's really well studied to be up to date with the projects in East Pasco and Southern Hernando. But yes, so for in that instance, yes, we would have to update the TIP. I would say that the chances are high that with the budget conversations in Tallahassee that there will be some projects that would be receive funding or receive benefit from some of those additional funds. And so those would require TIP amendments.
Okay.
But yeah, those would occur after June 9th. In fact, most of them, if they come, would be in the August meeting if it was going to be funds in the next year. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
It's just bad timing that the TIP process is when it is, and then our budget is, comes into play in July. So it doesn't work out really well from that standpoint.
Right. Okay. Got it.
Well, and that's
Thank
a
you.
good segue to, what does actually trigger a TIP amendment? And, if there is a new project or a significant difference in a current project because, funding changes, that would trigger a TIP amendment. Hopefully, it would mean a project is moving forward and not backwards. But anything can happen when the legislature's in session. You just don't really know. The governor could line item vetoes, things that's been known to happen before. If there are new federal dollars and there is, a lot of discussion about an infrastructure funding bill, that might result in some dollars that are not currently in the program. So all of those things well, I shouldn't say likely, but could influence the TIP in the form of an amendment.
All right. Thank you.
So I
Christine,
guess-
did you have one more? Sorry. Go ahead.
I apologize. I missed one of my questions in my notes here. So Dr. Wong, and this is directed back at you, just to confirm my understanding. In the smart cities category, you mentioned measuring travel time and the peak period travel time index. And I just wanted to confirm which modes are measured in that regard.
Only vehicles. I'm more than open to, not more than open, I'm actively seeking a data source that can yield that info for other modes. But I know we've had this conversation offline before. Bike-ped data is so expensive. We're making a lot of strides to getting something that we feel might be reliable, but we're not there yet. I'm not even sure that we'll be able to, I'm not sure we'll get there next year. But I think it seems promising. We've gotten we paid for some data sets that should be available to us in the near future. We have Strava, but there's problems about representation with any of those.
Yeah.
But yeah, for
Okay.
what we have now, it's pulled from either cell phone signals or in-dash navigation app from vehicles only.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
One thing to mention, sort of as a follow-up to that, is one of the projects that was added at Hart's request is to upgrade their CAD AVL, and for those who don't know, that's computer assisted dispatching and automated vehicle location system. Basically the way they track their buses to make sure they stay on time. That's a source of data potentially that could address at least the transit mode. So just keep that sort of in the back of your mind. You know, with every passing year, we get access to new and hopefully better data sources. And you know, making it more multimodal, I think, is would be a great thing to do.
Bill, did you have a last question? I don't think he's listening.
Looks like he's muted.
Yeah, I think he's talking to somebody else. I did have one last clarification, Johnny, if no one else does, but that was the order of the tables. You know, they're grouped by investment programs, but within those groups, are they prioritized, or is it just whatever the funds can?
For table 1, no, they're only organized according to investment program. For table 2, the first sort, if you will, or the first filter is investment program, and then based on the results of the analysis. And table 3, they're sorted by investment program and then jurisdiction, I believe. As best we can, we're trying to keep all similar project types together. So for tables 1, 2, and 3, projects that fit into state of good repair or Vision Zero or smart cities, they're all lumped together. And then within that, you know, they might be organized a little bit differently depending on the purpose of the table.
Thank you. Bill, are you with us? Did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, and it slipped my mind.
Okay,
Hold it for Wednesday. It'll come back.
It'll come back. Thank you. Thank you, Amy.
you're welcome. And Terrence, I can't see you, so I didn't know if you had any questions. I figured I'd give you an opportunity before we wrapped up.
Hey, sorry, I'm here. I'm struggling though with a couple things on the home front and work front. So,
Okay.
but no, I
problem.
have been listening. Johnny addressed most of the things we talked about before. So, you know, what we asked him to. So I'm very happy about that. And I know there's more on the horizon. I think the only thing that I really would like to see more is like just better layout of website, better interaction of like website. I would like for there to be one county app if possible, where people can come for information on projects. That just ties into this. So like, for example, I could click on a project on the list and it takes me to more information or something like that with, you know, just at the click of a button. But overall, like I know we're working toward that. I know I've brought that up a couple times, but this is good, and I think the community gets value out of it. Thanks, Johnny.
Thanks, Terrence. I remember from the
Thanks, Amy.
previous meeting, you were interested in getting more information to kind of like justify or explain the need for each of these projects. Unfortunately, we brainstormed and we couldn't come up with a good way of concisely providing that info. So to address it, I tried to learn as much as I could about all of the new priorities, just so that if I got a question in a committee meeting, I could, you know, just like quickly tell you the answer. Other than that, we will have representatives from all the jurisdictions at the meeting. So if you have questions about a specific project and you want more info, there should be someone on hand to answer it.
Got it. Thanks.
Well, I appreciate everybody joining at 5 o'clock on a Monday. And unless there's anything else, I think we're good to adjourn.
Can I just ask one question before everybody signs off? We are seeking in-person volunteers for your meeting on Wednesday. I think we need 4 or 5 more folks. I know, Amy, you said you'd be in and out, so that's appreciated for when you're there. But I'm just curious how many of the folks who are on the line now might be able to show up in person.
I'm
So,
planning on coming in
Rich,
person, Rich.
Great, thank you.
Rich, unfortunately, I won't be able to make it. My wife has surgery that day, or would have surgery Tuesday, so I won't be able to make it.
Okay, all right, so you're not going to be able to attend either way.
Zoom, I should be on Zoom, but yeah, we'll see
Okay,
how that goes.
all right, thank you.
Hey, Rich, this is Terrence. I should be able to make it, but I can't confirm until tomorrow.
Okay, just shoot us an email if you would.
Will do.
Are you close, Rich, to having the amount of people that you need?
Yeah, as of this afternoon, I think we were still short about 4 people.
Oh, goodness. Okay, count me in. Okay, count me in.
All right, and we'll put the squeeze on everybody else. Hopefully, we'll get the numbers.
Thank you, Carol. I
Bye,
didn't
everyone.
want to be there by myself.
No worries. We won't allow that.
Well, great committee meeting. Thank you all for taking your time.
Yes,
Thank
Thanks
thank
for
you.
organizing, Amy.
Yes,
Yep,
Amy,
we'll
thanks for
see
your
you all.
leadership.
And Cheryl and Rich also are pretty amazing at getting all this together too. So thank you all.
All right.
And
Thank
we'll
you,
see you
guys.
Wednesday.
See you
Bye.
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Take care.
Bye.